Hello students, welcome to Legacy IAS Academy. In today's video, we are going to discuss about one of the most important topic in the ethics, that is the ethics of Immanuel Kant, also called as Kantian Ethics, and the philosophy or the principles behind Kantian Ethics is something that is referred as deontology. So we are going to discuss in details what does deontology entails, what are its pros and what is the cons, and what was the concept or the principles on which Kant have given his moral principles. So first of all, if you try to understand Immanuel Kant, who was born in 1724 and died in 1804, is generally considered to be one of the most profound and original philosophers who ever have lived on the earth. He is equally well known for his metaphysics work. The metaphysics is a study of the being, the study of reality in the world, and also the subject of his book, very famous book that is called as Critique of Pure Reason. And as far as the moral philosophy is concerned, he has also written about his moral principles in a book that is Groundwork to the Metaphysics of Morals and the Critique of the Practical Reason. As far as our ethical principles or Kantian ethics is concerned, we have to depend on the groundwork to the metaphysics of moral because it is much more easier to understand as compared to his second book, that is a critique of practical reason. So before understanding that what actually led Kant to give his moral principle, we have to understand the background that were developing or the changes that are happening across the world and especially in the Europe at that particular time. So the background can be traced back to the era of enlightenment. So before enlightenment, the moral beliefs and practices that people used to depend upon is largely derived from the religion. We have a god, and in different countries, different religion, you have the god, and god has given you certain directives, certain commandments. For example, in Christianity, which was largely followed in the European countries, the 10 commandments were considered as the basic moral principles according to which all the humans, all the man had to act. And these were some basic principles such as don't steal, don't kill someone, don't injure your neighbor, and these kind of things. So what we can say that the whole concept of what is right, what is wrong, what we should do were deriving its source from the were deriving its origin from the divine source of wisdom, and that is why the rules that were being followed at that time has a kind of authority, because obviously if something is said by God, it has a very authoritative, we can stand nature as far as its following by the humans are concerned. And it is due to this nature there was a concept of belief in sin and punishment, and people all across the world of followers of different religion have this common belief that if you do something wrong, if you do something that is not accepted by the god, you will be committing a sin and sin will be punished. And when you are doing something in accordance with these principles that has been originated from the divine sources, that means you are doing something good, and that is why you will be rewarded. That means the good act will have good reward, the bad act will have bad punishment. So due to this reason, there were incentive to obey these code among all the people because there was a fear of divine wrath. However, when the era of enlightenment began, there was a strong questioning, especially among the intelligentsia of the Western countries, intelligentsia of Europe, and they started to challenge all this religious doctrine. Because enlightenment was the era when the dependency was not on the already traditional belief and practices of the religion. People started to question the nature of this belief. People started to question the logic behind this belief, and this was the era of pure reason, logic, and science. And as scientific revolution happened, as we have more and more understanding of the nature of the world around us, we can see there is a significant decline that has started to get be observed in the faith, especially the faith in God, the faith in the religious scriptures, as well as we also have decline in the dependency and belief in organized religion. And this kind of changes that happened in the society, driven by the scientific revolution, driven by the Renaissance thinking, it actually led to a very famous, we can say, philosopher, Friedrich Nietzsche, where he said that this is the time where the God is dead, or it is also, we can say, it is the beginning of the era where the death of God is something that was very much in circulation, because if we do not depend on God, why we have to worry about God? So these changes that were happening, it created a problem that is referred by enlightenment problem. The term enlightenment problem is given by a Scottish moral philosopher by the name of Alistair MacIntyre, and he has said that if there is a decline in the belief in religion, if decline in the faith of God, and if religion wasn't the foundation that gave moral belief their validity, what other foundation could there be? Because if we have to understand, before religion, God, divine sources were the one on which the morality of the humanity were dependent upon. And if these sources are discarded away, if these are not the foundation, then on what foundation we can believe the morality to exist? So this was a question that was among the humanities. Second question was that if we try to understand, if there is no God, if the God is dead as per Nietzsche, and therefore no guarantee of cosmic justice, because before we have this fear of punishment, we have this we can say a lure of good reward. And if that is not true, if there's no cosmic justice in the world, and there is no one to ensure that good guys will be rewarded and the bad guys will be punished, why should anyone on the earth bother trying to be good? Because everyone will try to then act as per their own self interest, whether it is good for other, whether it can cause some harm to others, that will not come into question. So this was the two question, profound question, that is something referred as enlightenment problem. And to answer this question, there was a need that was felt to have a secular determination of what morality is, and why everyone, despite absence of cosmic justice, why every human should strive to be moral. So rather than looking the answer for this in the religion, we should try to look the answer in a secular or non-religious manner. And to solve this enlightened problem, three responses were given by the moral philosophers of different era from different places of the world. The first such approach or theory is something that is called as social contract theory. Social contract theory was given by Thomas Hobbes, an English moral philosopher, and he says that essentially morality is nothing but a set of rules that humans have agreed upon. Now they have not agreed upon due to some divine terror, or did not have agreed upon because of some divine wrath or fear of divine wrath, but they had just agreed upon these moral principles among themselves in order to make living with one another possible. If there is no moral principles to be followed, if there is no rule of law, if there is no government, then the whole society will be chaotic society. The whole country can actually go into the state of anarchy, where everyone will try to kill, everyone will try to harm each other, and that is why the existence of the whole humanity will be threatened. And that is why there is a need of government, and we have actually signed a contract with the government, which is called a social contract theory. The second approach was something that is referred as utilitarianism, also called as consequentialism. Now, if we talk about utilitarianism, it has been given, the principles has been given by Hume as well as Bentham. And both of these philosophers said that if we talk about humans, humans are driven by two sovereign masters. Basically, they are controlled by two sovereign masters. The one master is pleasure and happiness, and the other master is punishment, or we can say sadness. So basically, the moral principles of humanity demands that everyone should try to do such things that add to the amount of happiness, and try to do such things that reduces the amount of misery in the world. To understand this, basically what he says, that we do not have to depend on the religion, we do not have to depend on the God to derive our moral principle. Our moral principles should be such that it allows every human to take such actions that overall the amount of happiness in the world increases. That means we have to work for the good of large number of people, and we also have to ensure that the amount of misery in the world decreases. That means we have to make sure that the sadness, misery is decreasing in whatever act you are committing. So that was something that is referred as utilitarianism. And basically, whether an act is good act or bad act, as per utilitarianism principle, it is determined by the consequences of the act. If any act you are participating in finally leading to the happiness of large number of people, then that act is good. If you are taking part in certain act which is causing misery to a large number of people, then that act is bad. So that was the simple principles of consequentialism. However, Kant was not satisfied with either social contract theory approach or the utilitarianism approach as far as the moral principles are concerned. Kant believed that we all as humans have awareness that we are free and rational agents. And that is why our moral principles should come out from this particular concept, that every human, every man is a free and rational agent. And that is the basis of our moral principles. And whether an act is good or bad should also derive when we take this particular approach, this particular concept into consideration. So now let us try to understand what Kant actually told. So Kant has a very big problem with utilitarianism, because Kant said that if you believe consequentialist or utilitarianism to be true, there is a problem. And the problem is that many times the act of consequentialist is contrary to what we might call as a moral common sense. Now let us try to understand this with a simple example. Suppose we have two persons. One person is a daily wage laborer who is earning suppose 100 rupees, and other person is millionaire who is earning as you can say millions of rupees. Now for a particular donation to helping out some poor people or to helping out some needy people, suppose this millionaire is giving 10,000 rupees as a donation, and at the same time this person who is acting as a daily wage labor, he is earning just 100 rupees a day, but he gave whole 100 rupees to help this needy person. So what we can understand, if we talk about from the perspective of utilitarianism, so obviously the 10,000 rupees will cause much greater happiness and the 100 rupees will cause lesser amount of happiness. That means as per consequence list, the act of millionaire to donate 10,000 rupees is much higher on the plane of morality as compared to the act of this daily wage laborer who has given just 100 rupees. But can we understand this to be correct? If we talk about or go and ask to general public, and even if you ask yourself, you'll obviously say that the act of this daily wage laborer who have contributed his entire income of a day, 100 rupees, mere 100 rupees to this particular needy person, has committed a better or higher act of morality as compared to a millionaire who has given 10,000 rupees. So that is why we cannot just depend upon the consequences of an action. We have to think of some other thing as well. Second, he said that many times the consequences and motivation is something that is very starkly different from each other. For example, if suppose you are trying to save a person who is drowning, and if you are able to successfully save him, then obviously as per consequence list, you are able to produce a higher or greater happiness by saving these people. But if we talk about the motivation, we have to understand that maybe after you save this person, he can went on a rampage, and maybe he's a serial killer, he has went on and killed large number of people. So how can you determine whether your act of saving this person is a good act or bad act? Because if you look at consequences, he has went on and suppose killed 50 people, so obviously the misery has increased in the world, and that is something that is against good action. But your motivation was to help a person, and you, that time you did not know whether the person is a serial killer or not, and that is why your act should not be considered as a bad act. As per Kant's ethical principle, it should be considered as a good act. So what we can understand that as far as the Kant is concerned, he said that many times the consequences is something that is out of our control. Whatever will be the consequences of action, that we cannot determine. Only thing that we know for sure about is what was our motivation when we are committing that particular act, when we are doing that particular act. And that is why Kant said that rather than depending on consequences, we should focus on the motivation of the actor. So these were some differences that Kant had with utilitarianism. So what are the basis of the Kantian ethics? So the most basic concept that Kantian ethics tells us is something that is called as the goodwill. As far as the Kant is concerned, he gave a statement where he says that only thing that is unconditionally good is a goodwill, and person do what they do because they think it is their duty, and that should be the basis of the morality. And when a person is acting from a sense of moral obligation, that is when we can say that act is purely good and act is good in a real manner. To understand this, suppose that Kant says that you can take any good qualities. For example, wealth is a good quality, beauty is a good quality, but wealth is something that can corrupt people. Beauty is something, if someone is more beautiful, it is quite possible that he or she might be shallow in nature. There is less development of the emotional response and emotional qualities in the humans. So that is why any attributes which is considered as good in our society can also turn to be bad. The only thing that can be good unconditionally is the good will, and that is why any act should be seen that whether it is good act or bad act from a sense of moral obligation. The second principle of Kantian ethics is something that we can say is duty versus inclination. Here Kant has clearly established the fact that many times people act out of self-interest, and most of the time we can say people act out of the self-interest, and they perform any action from purely, they rather perform any action from the purely moral motives. And that is why it is something that should not be frowned upon, because psychologically our mind is tuned with our society in such a manner that everyone acts in their own self-interest. But many times there's something that is starkly different from that. For example, suppose a soldier is there, is fighting the war, and he came to know that a grenade has been launched, and around him there are a lot of his compatriots are there, a lot of his brethren are there, and to many times what soldiers can do, so this particular soldier can do, if he see the grenade coming, he can actually go and jump on the grenade, so that he want to save the life of all his brethren. Now this is something that cannot be explained from the principles of self-interest, And sometimes when the person freely chooses to do the right thing simply because it is the right thing to do. For example, the jumping of a soldier on the grenade to save the life of all the people nearby, that is a act of self, that is not an act of self interest. The soldier has done that because it is the right thing to do in that particular circumstances. And when such person do such kind of things, the whole world is basically lighted with a brief glow of what Kant has said is a moral goodness. So that is all about the duty versus inclination. The third principle of the Kant, that is a part of categorical imperative, is something that Kant has said, that how can you determine whether the act you are going to perform, the act you are going to do is right or not? Simply ask yourself that whether your act fulfills this principle or not. And what is this principle? This principle is that act only on that maxim, act as per that rules, act as per that principle that you can will as a universal law. That means whether the act that you are going to perform, do you want everyone in the world to do so, and will you really want to live in such world where everyone is doing that act? To understand this in simple manner, suppose you are going to break a promise that you have made to someone. Now, whether this act is good or bad, how can you determine that? Simply ask that, do you want to live in a world where everyone is breaking the promises? Because there will be no trust among the humanity, and there's no trust among the humans. Obviously, we cannot expect the world to go on as we expect it to. So that was the first maxim. The second maxim was that Kant believed every human is a free and rational creature. Every human can take a decision as per their own understanding, as per their own thinking, and that is why everyone should treat people as an ends in themselves, never merely as a means to one's own end. That means you should not try to manipulate people in doing your bidding, because they should be allowed to take the decision based on their own understanding. And that is why Kant says that you should do unto others as you would have them do unto you. That means when you are doing anything, when you are responding to someone, when you are interacting with someone, always interact in such a manner as you'll want the other person also to interact and act toward you. And thus, rather than depending on the manipulation to get our task carried out, we should focus more upon the explanation. That means if you want someone to do something, rather than trying to manipulate him, you should go and explain all the situation. And after you have explained the situation, now your work is done. Now you should let that other person, who is a free and rational thinker, to decide whether he want to do the work you want him to do or not. That is his choice. So that was the 3-4 major maxims, or the main maxims, that Kantian ethics tells us. So coming to the questions of enlightenment, what was the Kant's understanding of enlightenment? So enlightenment was something that Kant believed can be defined as man's emancipation from his self-imposed immaturity. Now, what does immaturity means in the Kantian context? So Kant has said that immaturity is something that when man is completely dependent upon some divine principles, dependent upon some religious scriptures, dependent upon God, and even dependent upon the institutions that are related to God, such as religious institutions, that can be church and mosque and all these kind of things. So that is something that is immature in nature. As far as our understanding of moral law, as far as the determination of moral principles are concerned, the categorical imperative and everything that moral law employs is something that could only be discovered through the reason. So we should not just accept whatever the church is saying us, or to us, or whatever the God is saying to us, or whatever the religious scripture is saying to us. We should focus and depend upon our reason to understand what is right and what is wrong, what is morally right and what is morally wrong. And thus, this transformation of the world from the pre-enlightenment to the post-enlightenment is something that is not to be lamented about. It is ultimately something to celebrate, because now we as humans have been totally or completely emancipated from our self-imposed immaturity and our dependence on the religion and the God. So that was the belief of the Kant, and that is something that you can also understand is an answer of the Kant to the enlightenment problem that has been initiated earlier in the video. So after all the discussion, what we can say in conclusion about the Kantian ethics, that Kant has clearly established that as far as the moral law, as far as the moral rights and wrongs are concerned, it is a law that we as a rational and free beings must impose on ourselves. We should not depend on kings, we should not depend on the church, we should not depend on the religious scriptures to tell us what is right, what is wrong. It is something we should try to initiate from our own thinking, our own reasoning. And this is why some of our deepest feelings are reflected in our reverence for the moral law, and why when we act as we do out of respect for it, in other words, from a sense of duty, we fulfill ourselves as a rational being. So that is all about the Kantian ethics, the basic maximal principles of the Kantian ethics. I hope you understood the concept of this deontology in this particular video. So that is all for this particular video. Thank you very much.